let's get started. So yeah, last time we saw a few things, right? One was the request dispatcher, and the request dispatcher, so that we can transfer control from one servlet to another servlet. So one of the servlet, see, when a client here is mainly a browser, right? So when a browser connects to our server, okay, on the server it would be identifying which particular servlet it wants to target, right? So the targeted servlet is identified, and then in the processing of that servlet, fine, in the service method of that servlet, the servlet has the option of using another servlet, right? That's where a request dispatcher may be used. It's not only another servlet, could use any other resources, okay, any other URL which is available, and so and that's where request dispatcher can be used. So any questions from, one is request dispatcher, and other thing I think we saw was about the cookie, right? So any questions from last time's or up till now, any questions, whatever questions you may have? Yeah. And that servlet.txt file, all of, I think by now you should have gone through it. So any questions from there? Okay. Fine. Okay, I think a few things last time. I think as far as the request dispatcher is concerned, I discussed only the forward method. You know, there are in request dispatcher there are two methods, forward and include. You know how they differ? You know what exactly is the difference between forward and include? Okay, let me come back here. I think. Okay. See, it's something like this, right? I'll just show partial things only, may not be all the things. Okay, so let's say this is our server side, and we have our component. So a browser here, okay, let's say this is a browser, and it has targeted one URL. Okay, so there is a URL which is targeted, and that URL corresponds to one of the servlet. Okay, fine. To this servlet, a request and response object which have been managed specifically for this URL, fine, because there's a request coming from the client. Request and response object are managed by the server side, okay, but there is a targeted servlet. So this is our target servlet. Let's call it as servlet 1. Okay, so on the servlet 1, service method is going to be invoked where the two objects are made available. Fine. So both of these objects, there's a request object and there's a response objects. Both of them are made available to the servlet 1. Okay, fine. And then the servlet 1 decides that no, I would like to forward. I would so there are two options. You can say I would like to forward or I would like to include. Okay, so what's the difference between forward and include? Okay, so first thing, whenever it says forward, there's something which is done with the response. Okay, each time you do a forward, so what you would be doing is you will be creating a request dispatcher. This is a request dispatcher, RD. Let me just put RD for request dispatcher, created for targeting a servlet 2. So this is my servlet 2. Okay, fine. So when we so a request dispatcher would be managed, which corresponds to our servlet 2. Okay, so so if someone uses a forward, so from the servlet invokes a method on this by saying forward. Okay, when it says forward, okay, so if this is forward and a request response both are given, so if these two are given as parameter to the, so if you are saying request, so you say forward, give the request and the response, right? So when you do this, right, the same request and response object, because of the forward method, will be used for invoking the service method on servlet 2. But one thing what happens is, when we say forward, calling forward would do something on the response. It invokes reset. It resets the response. Okay, fine. Forward means reset the response. Okay, so if anything, one thing is like, what is reset? Resetting a response means, up till now, if you have done some headers or any such thing, right, you started writing to it, or all of that will be getting cleared. Okay, when anything which you have done on the response, that will all get cleared. Okay, another thing to know here is, fine, we understand that response can be, response is nothing but it contains a buffer, right? So if the buffer, which is, let's say this is a buffer in the response, if this buffer became full, we understand it would actually be sent, the partial response will start going to the client. So if that has been initiated, in that case reset will be an error. Okay, reset would fail. We cannot reset once the response has been committed. And if the response gets committed, we cannot be sending the, we cannot reset. And therefore, if the response is committed, okay, you cannot do a forward. Okay, so if the response is committed, forward would throw an exception. Okay, the whole idea of forward is, I am not the entire responsibility of giving a response. The response is to be purely handled by the servlet 2. Servlet 1 has no role in putting the response to the client. Okay, whereas on the other hand, we also have the include method. Just like forward, there's also a method called include. Okay, so the difference in include is, in case of an include, it would be something like this, that servlet 1 has started writing to the response. Okay, so it's not that servlet 2 is responsible for giving the response. Okay, it's a servlet 1's responsibility to give the response. Okay, so while writing to the response, it felt that, okay, some part of the response can be added. So it has put something in the buffer. Okay, it has started writing some of the things into the buffer, and then it says, okay, some part, now whatever I have written, maybe I would like to include more thing which is prepared by the servlet 2. So servlet 2 will only be able to append into whatever has been added by the servlet 1, and then, wherever include was called, after that he is still free. The servlet 1 is still free to add more things to the response. So it's like including somewhere in between. I just want to include some content generated by another servlet. Okay, so just including a content, it's not the response entire. The response is not the responsibility of servlet 2. It is servlet 1 only handling the response. Okay, whereas forward means it doesn't handle the response. Response is handled by the servlet 2. And so clear with about difference between forward and include. Okay, forward would reset the buffer if there was anything, and reset would not happen if some response was returned to. If you start writing, it will have to be cleared. If it got committed, then forward would fail. Fine, clear on this? So include or forward, right? So in response, who is generating the response? Who is taking care of the response? First servlet or the second servlet? Okay, forward means second servlet. Include is only just some part to be included as by taking content from servlet 2. Okay, but response in that case is servlet 1. Fine, so that should be clear. Fine, request dispatcher, two methods, forward and include. Okay, last time I think I just was mentioning about the forward. Okay, but yeah, include is also there. But fine, so but yes, one more thing. Most commonly used thing is forward. Okay. Okay. Like last time also I was mentioning, the first servlet is just doing the processing work. Okay, and then whatever the results of processing are there, they are added as attributes. So attributes can be managed in a servlet request. Last time I think we saw this part, that attributes can be managed in a servlet request. And okay, and then you do a forward, so that second servlet will be able to see the processed attributes, processed objects which are available as attribute in the request, and then it might be able to display them and show them back as a response. So in the response, I just want to show some of the things. And so, okay, so that was mainly forward that we use here. Okay. Okay, last time we also saw about cookie, right? I think, yeah, we saw about cookie. How to set a cookie? Cookies are managed on client. Okay, so browsers would manage cookies, and they manage cookies URL wise and host wise. Okay, which host has set a particular cookie? A cookie corresponds to a particular path from a particular host. So a URL basically corresponds to a URL. And so anytime a request is sent to a client, anytime a response is, anytime a request is sent to the server by a client, the client would include a header to set all the cookies. It would set all the cookies in the header of the request, and the request would contain cookies which were set earlier by the server. Okay, so server receives the cookies which it has set on a client. Okay, and cookies have their expiry date, right? So they will expire after a, so they have some duration up to which they will be valid. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's come back to the notes and let's see what are the other things to be done. Fine. So, okay, so this is about cookie. Yeah. Okay, now let's look at another aspect which is about, so we, cookie was done, right? Right, cookie is done last time, right? Cookie was done last time. And now what we look at is the session. Okay, we call it as session management, but let's see what exactly is happening going on for managing the session. HTTP is a stateless protocol. We call it as a stateless protocol. So what do we mean by that this is a stateless protocol? HTTP on its own is a stateless. Okay. So stateless here, it signifies that yes, that is like each time. Okay. By the client, right? and the response is rather I should say each time each request, okay. That means one request is there and you get back a response, and then the two will forget each other. It's like that. So each request is independent. Okay, and each request response is independent transaction between the client and the server. Okay, so in this, like from a browser, right, if you communicate with a server and server has given back one response, right, for one request it has given back one response. Now a second request comes from the same browser. See, at the same time so many browsers are connecting to the server, right? So for a server to be able to identify, right, as far as HTTP protocol itself is concerned, it doesn't have any such thing as, oh, I should be tracking the other client. Okay, but the whole idea here is, how do we track a client? How does a server track the client? Okay, and so how does a server track the client, right? So it's like, it's not that every time you want it doesn't track each and every client. Okay, only if needed tracking can be initiated. Okay, well, let's try to understand how it is done. Okay, in case of Tomcat, let's see how it is done, right? And not only Tomcat, in case of a web container. Okay, fine. So how it is done in case of a web container, let's check that part. Okay, so for this, how it is done? Okay, let me try to show you diagrammatically. Okay. Okay, we'll have to understand the server side, what activity happens on the server side. Okay, to track a client. It's only when one of the application on the server side decides that, oh, I would like to track this client, right? See, for example, before a client does, your system, your application which you have designed may require a client to log in. And once he is logged in, then you understand, okay, oh, I know this client, and now whatever activity he is doing, you would like to do something about it. Okay, for example, you develop a shopping cart. All of you have done something like a shopping cart. I mean, you have all experienced a shopping cart, right? Okay, a cart kind of a thing we have all experienced. Okay, so it's like this, that you want to manage, maybe someone is adding, there are products or whatever it is there which are managed in a cart. Okay, but how do we manage this cart? How do we keep track of that this is the same client in whose cart you would like to add something, manage something? Okay, So for that, yes, what exactly is done? Let's check that on the how the whole thing works here. Okay. So first thing is about tracking the client, and then we'll see about the cart thing. Okay, how because of tracking the clients, okay, how the tracking of client is done, and then we'll be able to see the something like a shopping cart kind of activity. So let's check that. Okay. 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 So if we understand on the server side what's happening, let's see. So this is our server side. Okay. Here is a server. Okay. When a request comes from the client, one thing is to keep track of a client, right? If I want to track a client, then some unique ID must be generated for a client. Okay, but that generation of unique ID will be initiated once the application on the server side decides that yes, I want to track this particular client. So when so first part will be, okay, there's a request which is coming. So this is one client. There'll be multiple clients. Understand this, okay? So this is one of the client. This client has sent a request. Okay, so a request object would be created, right? So when he is sending a request, we understand one more thing. Earlier we saw about cookie. Okay, cookie means the information which the server had set earlier, all that information is sent back, sent to the server. Okay, so client is sending cookies to the server which were set earlier by the server. Okay, any cookie which has been set on the client by a server would be made available to the server in each subsequent communication. Okay, so any request which goes, all the cookies which are meant for this particular client would be made available. Okay, now one thing what happens here is if the server is trying to track a client, okay, so let's say you sent a request and there was no previous tracking or anything, so maybe there were no cookies at all coming from the client. Okay, now what would happen in the first time? Okay, the server wants to do something about tracking the client would be first thing on a request. Okay, we have, so this is my, let's say, the request object. So we use the request, or this request is the HTTP servlet request I'm talking about. Okay, we have that interface called HTTP servlet request. So in this, it will say, I want to track the client. We'll see exactly how it wants to, what method is required for doing it. But this decides that I would like to track a client. Okay, the client from where this request has been received, that client needs to be tracked. So if that client needs to be tracked, he says, okay, I will manage one, what we call as a session ID. So it manages a session ID. Okay, so it manages two things. One is a ID value which is generated. It's a string basically. So there is a session ID string which is generated. Some unique string would be generated, and it would also create one object, okay, which is like a basket. Okay, this is an object which is called the HTTP session object. Okay, so it's like, okay, a basket has been created for this client, and this is his ID. Okay, so I have a basket in which we can keep objects for this client. Anything which we want to do with this client, yes, that can be generated. And so this HTTP session object which is created is identified by this particular session ID. So like this, for each client who is being tracked, a valid session ID and a corresponding HTTP session object exists on a client, on the server. And for every client who is being tracked, okay, a session ID and a corresponding HTTP session objects are managed on the server. And that's what we should understand. Okay, so let's say it is the first time, right? So if it is the first time that it is the decision which has been taken that this client needs to be tracked, an object would be managed for us. So HTTP session object is managed, and in this HTTP session object we will have a method called get session ID, and we'll get be able to get the HTTP session ID also. Okay, now what happens is okay, so now how does it so now next time, okay, so first time this is managed, and once this is managed, the response, once it has been decided that he should be tracked, in the response a cookie would be set. Okay, so the response is, so first time a request comes and then you decided to track the client, so session ID would be, okay, the session ID is sent as a cookie back to the client. So this client in all its subsequent requests will be sending a session ID, the same session ID. Okay, and now we cannot be tracking all the clients. One more yeah, see, HTTP being a stateless session, right? What would happen is you have been using the browser, you connect to a site, right? And then you just disconnect. How will the site know that you are no longer active and not working on that particular application at all? Yeah, you created a shopping cart or something, you did a login, and then you can just be idle for a long time, or you may not be idle, you might have even closed down your machine. How will the server realize that, okay, this client is no longer active? So for that, what has to be done? Oh, we have to use something called a timeout. Right? We have to go on a mechanism of timeout. So each session ID and the session object which is generated, right, keeps a timeout. So there is a timeout value which is there. Okay. So what is the maximum idle time which is allowed for a session? Okay. So there is something called max idle time. Okay. So HTTP session has a setting called what is its maximum idle time. Okay. What is the max idle time, after which this will be invalidated. Okay. So session IDs are generated on the server side. A HTTP session object is also managed corresponding to the session ID. Okay, so this would correspond to one client, and in the subsequent request which come, you will be able to fetch the same session ID coming back to the server. So each time a request comes, it comes with a session ID. If this client is being tracked, if the client is not being tracked, there's no session ID. Okay, there is a timeout value created for the session object. We fine, you might have actually experienced this timeout things in some of the applications, like you do a net banking. If you have done net banking or any such thing, and financial things, they are very sensitive, security, quite security sensitive, and in such cases you might have experienced that, oh, you get logged out if you don't you keep it idle for some particular amount of time. So that is something like this. Okay, there is a session which is managed, and this session object has a timeout. So in the background within the server, what happens is, from time to time, it just keeps track of which are the HTTP session objects for which no request has arrived for a particular duration of time. That is the max idle timeout. Okay, so what is the maximum idle time? So that is being managed in the session object. If that much time is over, right, then this would be invalidated. So it says, no, I am no longer going to keep track of this particular client, and it forgets this particular session ID. Okay, fine. Now okay, so what exactly happens is like this. Okay, yeah, okay, I think I'll also open the API part, because there are certain methods of HTTP session. Let's look at some of the methods of HTTP session, and then we'll go over it again. Okay. Okay. So there are certain methods, useful methods of HTTP session. These are some settings basically. One of the things which is common across there are three things where there are commonality. I'll come to that part. But before that, let's see this HTTP session, some settings which are available. One is related to that max idle time. Okay, there's something called last requested time. Okay, yeah, I think I'll just show it here. Okay, let's go to this API. HTTP session. Okay, let's see this. So we have this HTTP session interface and it has these methods. Okay, methods are like this. Get attribute. Okay, all those things are fine. Attribute things, I'll show what exactly what is meant by attribute. So we have creation time, fine. We have the ID which is our session ID. So get ID will give you the session ID. Here is the other thing. Get last accessed time. Okay, so this value is actually getting updated. See, what is happening is on the server, each time a request comes, first thing the server is doing is, does this request contain a session ID? If it has a session ID, let me fetch the corresponding session object, and if there is a session object, I'll update the last access time. So it is just going to update the last access time, whether you may or may not be using the session at all. You may not be using the session. Okay, but if the session object is already managed for this client, okay, the updation of the last access time will take place. Okay, so this is one thing. Then there is this max inactive interval. Yeah, not idle time. I was mentioning idle time. It is nothing but your max inactive interval. So max inactive interval is something. This is what is this is a method. We have this method as a get method. There's also a set method for this. Okay, and there's a corresponding set method. I'll show that. Okay. Set max inactive interval. See, settings are two. There is a max inactive interval. Attribute thing will come to that. Set, remove, and okay, this is a deprecated method, put value. Okay, there is also this method called is new. Okay, you have invalidate is new. Okay, this one is a deprecated method. Get value names. Get value is also deprecated. Okay. Get session context is deprecated. Get servlet context, that's what is fine. So you can know we understand what is a servlet context, right? So we can find the corresponding application from here. Okay, max inactive interval, last access time, and ID. There's nothing. Okay, fine. So only few things except for managing attributes. Recollect managing of attributes, which is also done in the managing attributes, we can which is done in servlet request. Servlet request also has methods for managing attribute to store objects, some results of processing. First servlet doing a processing work, whatever objects it has done by created by processing, it may like to keep that in the request and then forward it to the next servlet, right? So same way, you might like to keep something in the session object to be used subsequently in a subsequent request coming from the same client, because session corresponds to a client. Okay, fine. Session corresponds to one particular session of a client. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So attribute related methods are common. Okay, there are 4 methods related to attribute. I'll come to that later. But otherwise, other attributes of a HTTP session are creation time, max inactive interval, last access time, and ID. Okay. Okay. So let's see this again here, right? Okay, fine. So first time, see now one more thing if you understand here is, once see first time it is taken, a decision is taken on the server side by an application. Okay, so by an application means within the service method, someone decides, no, that this is a request which I have received from this client, but now onwards I would like to track the client. If it decides I want to track a client, we understand a session, HTTP session object would be getting created. So when the HTTP session object is created, fine, but you understand at this point of time, the client is not aware of the session ID. Fine, the client does not have the session ID yet. Okay, at this point of time, is new is a method which will tell you whether it is the one where the client is aware of the session ID or not. Okay, fine. So it has, the session ID has not yet come from the client. It is just generated here on the server side. At that point of time, the HTTP session will say is new is true. Okay, fine. First time we decided to track, the subsequent response which is sent would contain the session ID, a cookie to give the session ID to the client, and now all subsequent requests coming from this client would contain the session ID. Okay, fine. So you know what exactly is done on the server side. If you look at the server again, okay, let's see how the server processes tracking. Okay, how a client tracking is processed on the server side. So from server's point of view, okay, just from the server's point of view, when the server receives a request, first thing is, let me see if it contains a session ID. If it contains a session ID, fine. First thing I have to do is update the corresponding, if it's a valid session ID, update the corresponding HTTP session object. So this object will be updated to say, oh, this was last accessed by at so and so. So last accessed time is going to be updated. Okay, fine. On, see, you may not be using the session object. Your application is not yet using the session object, but the Tomcat's responsibility is that I have received a cookie which contains a session ID, and whatever the HTTP session corresponds to this, the last access time needs to be updated on it. Okay, so that's the first. This would happen each time. Every time a request comes, this is what needs to be done. Okay, so this is updated. Okay, I have been so this is, this is how the server knows that this client is still active. Okay, and then we have the max inactive interval. So one is the last access time, and there is this max inactive interval. Okay, so if the now the max inactive interval is a setting which can be changed. So when someone starts tracking, when the HTTP session object is created, you have an option of changing the value of the max inactive interval. Okay, this is a setting, max inactive interval, which is managed on the one is you can manage it on for each HTTP session object individually when it is created first time. Okay, but we have a default value which is managed by configuration, and by default the default configuration which you have is it gives you 30 minutes. Okay, so normally this is 30 minutes of max inactive interval. Okay, normal default would be 30 minutes. Okay, otherwise yes, you can set that max inactive interval. So you want, you can change it on the HTTP session object. Okay, Fine. And yes, this is okay. Fine. So, fine. So this is one kind of thing. That is max inactive. These two values are going to be updated, and just like we have a garbage collector for our JVM, same way you can understand that there will be something to uh, get rid of the inactive clients, the HTTP session object which are there for the inactive clients. So if there is no activity for this, so let's say that garbage collector kind of, or you can call it as a session collector. So there is a session collector maybe which is working from time to time. So whenever it starts working, it would just compare the two things. Okay, it has to compare last access time, the current time, and check it with the max inactive interval, the difference between current time and the last access time. If it exceeds the max inactive interval, fine, then it would invalidate the, so HTTP session object, even programmatically if you want, you can say, okay, I would like to make this as invalid session. Okay, so you have the method called invalidate. Okay, so you can do a invalidate on a HTTP session just to say, okay, this session is no longer valid. Okay, so HTTP session object, they can be invalidated. Okay, and yeah, and you have this yeah. Okay, but first thing, one of the things here is, how do you start tracking? I didn't talk about that. How do you start tracking the client? I said, oh, if he's being tracked, then a session will be managed. But how does one start tracking the a client? So there's no specific method which is exactly like, okay, this is how you'll start tracking the client. But we have a method which is there in the servlet, HTTP servlet request. So HTTP servlet request, okay, HTTP servlet request has a method okay, this method is an overloaded method which would return HTTP session object. Okay, name of the method is get session. And it takes as parameter a boolean value. Okay, so boolean is about whether to be created if not existing. Okay, so understand this method, right? We have no parameter overload where we may not pass a parameter. Okay, so if you don't pass a parameter, fine, the default value will be true. Okay, so default is true. Not passing a parameter means create is true. And one more thing, create doesn't mean it has to create. Create means create if not found. Okay, create if not exist. Understand this. If it exists, it will not be creating. Okay, if it exists, it will not be creating. Okay, so if the service method, in a service method you receive the object of HTTP servlet request, right? Your first parameter is HTTP servlet request. So if the HTTP servlet request, fine, if it is saying in that, if you use this method with a value of true or false, right? First method is saying, okay, a boolean parameter is there. So if I use the get session and say request.get session and say this is false, request.get session false would return a HTTP session object if it exists. If it doesn't, if this client is already being tracked, if he is not being tracked, you will get a null. Okay, it returns a null if the client is not already being tracked. If the client is being tracked, you get the session object. Okay, And in the second case, if you pass true as a parameter, if the client is being tracked, you will get the session. If the client was not being tracked, that means there is no HTTP session object for him. In that case, it starts tracking the client. So HTTP session creation happens by this method only. So we have only one method, get session. Fine. That's how you can start tracking the client. Okay. Fine. And the same method is for also getting the either it is starting or it is an existing one. Okay. So you can, if you use without any parameter, then it is like true only. Okay. Okay. So it's something like this. Okay. So we have a public method returns HTTP session object. Name of the method is get session. Takes a parameter which is a boolean. Create if not exist. Okay. Fine. And the same method is a overload. Right. So if you don't pass, if you use this, okay, this is like okay. So this is true. Okay. That parameter is true, considered true. It's like just invoking this method with true. Okay, now I'll just put part of the service method, public void service, just to show as an example. In the service method, you have, okay, this would be service method in the HTTP servlet, or maybe it's do get or do post, any of the do methods, but you know, this is also overload available in HTTP servlet. So in HTTP servlet, you might have the service method with HTTP servlet request. So within this, fine, you may have done whatever processing. Okay, but now you decide, okay, okay, if you invoke HTTP session equal to okay. So if I am using false, okay, and that should be clear, right? So this is the example where we have, so someone may write like this now. So I find that he is not being tracked, right? Okay, how do I know that he is not being tracked? So you'll say, okay, if session is equal to null, right? In that case, you might like to say, let session be equal to request dot get session. You may say true or you just pass it without parameter. So in this case here, okay, you have ensured that he is now being tracked. Okay. And so this is how, okay. So if this, okay, else what it means is, sorry. Okay, in the else part, what it exactly means is, let's see. Okay, the client was already being tracked, and that's what it means, the else part. If it is null, the client was not tracked. Okay, I think I have written that already. Okay. Okay. Now, coming to the usage of sessions. This is clear how to create, how to get a session. Session object to be managed. Yes, there's this method only. There's no other method to, how you'll get a HTTP session object. Get session on a request object. Okay. So you get a null because he is not being tracked earlier, or he was being tracked but he timed out basically. Fine. Maybe you were idle for a long time, so tracking on the server side he just forgets it, right? Because max idle timeout has gone. Okay. Fine. So each time a request goes, the last access time would be updated, so that, you know, request going from client to server is necessary. Okay, within that max idle timeout. You may or may not work with the session object, that's okay. Okay, fine. So to start tracking a client, this is what should be done. Okay, now from the shopping cart point of view, I'll just now show you what someone does with the shopping cart point of view. So now in this case, in the first part, let's say, oh, he's so he is not, now, you know, he is not being, he was not, you just want to start tracking him, right? So you want to create a cart for him. Okay, so what is a cart? If you say shopping cart, what is a cart? A list of items, list of you know, purchases or something, list of orders, maybe something like that, right? Okay, so what I am assuming is you have a class called order or order item, or I should say product item. Yeah, so you have a class called product item separately. Okay, so we can assume we have a class called one product item, right? So a shopping cart normally has product item. Okay, a product item would contain which product and the quantity. Okay, fine, how much quantity and which product, something like that, right? So shopping cart normally contains that, so that can be here. Okay, and then what you do is, once you want to start tracking, you can now, here you can say, okay, let's create a list of product item. Okay, equals new. So you created a list, but what do we do with the list? How do we link it to the client? We need to link it to the session, right? So we'll just say session dot add attribute. Fine, session dot add attribute cart. product. Okay. So once you have added it in the session, okay, as an attribute, the same session object, right? So in a subsequent request, when it comes, okay, when the service method is there, okay, fine. So yeah, actually, to have a proper code, what I should be doing here is, even before this, yeah, here someone could have done something like declaring the variable list of product item. Okay. Okay, that not you don't do it, just equal to yeah, a declaration, just a variable being declared. Okay, and this could then be okay. So here is where you would initialize. So the first time you are fine, you are creating a session. So you got a session. Yeah, you got a session here, right? Okay, this would create a session. This would not be null. When you pass no parameters or you pass a true, it's one and the same. In this case, it won't return a null. Session would not be null here. Okay. Session would not be null. In fact, if someone tries to check, like, okay, if someone says, okay, let me put a system out println kind of a thing. Okay, that would be true. Okay. And this would be true here. Okay. Here, if someone tries this same thing, okay, in the else part, if someone tries to say, okay, is new, okay, this is false. Okay. Fine. So in the else part, what would be done? If he is new, you create a cart, right? You initialize with this. In the else part, what should be done? Cart product items dot equal to, sorry. Here also you'll have to say, get it from this. Okay. Oh, we haven't done the add attribute. Oh, have we? Yeah, sorry. When we do a add attribute, there are two parameters to be passed. Maybe something like that. So you give some string, which is a name by which you identify the object. So here is the list object, which you are setting as an attribute. This is the object, and this is the name given for that object. Okay. So here you just simply use this. Okay. But one thing, the return type here is a, what's the return type? Object. You'll have to do a casting. Okay. Cast is as a list of product item. So you have some kind of a list, okay, which acts as a cart, and fine. And so this is how you have this, right? And in the subsequent thing here, your code here will be about, okay, if he has done, what is the request? If the request is about adding the item in this cart product list, you will add the item, or it's about removing something, you do that all processing. But this is your list object, okay, the cart object. So the whole point is that you manage your cart as a list in a HTTP session. In the HTTP session, it would be an attribute, session dot add attribute. Okay. First time, right? And otherwise, first time add attribute. Subsequently, you'll only use a get attribute. Okay. and this is the name which you have used. So you have used some attribute name for heading the item. Okay. Anyway, so we may have to try some such things practically also, okay? And I'm just showing you some part of the code, how the session objects are normally used. So session are like this. So, okay, now coming to the methods. Fine, I think last time also we have seen these methods for managing attributes, okay? And which are the methods? 4 methods. Okay, so why I put this, I'll just show that. So we have this public method returns enumeration of string, get attribute names. Public method, we have the method called get attribute, and that should return object string name. I think before, yeah, even before this, I should have put the other one. Method returns void add attribute. String, give a name and store any kind of object there. Okay, that's your attribute object. I'll call it as the attribute object. So you can manage attributes here, and we also have the method returns void remove attribute by the name. So you have given name. Okay, this is the attribute name. When I'm saying name, it's the attribute name. So we have 4 methods to manage attributes. Okay, these methods are common. Okay, or these methods are common for 3 items. Okay, there are 3 things where the attributes can be managed. One is servlet request. So we saw that servlet request also you can manage attributes. Okay, we have the servlet context, and we even have the HTTP session. Okay, I put them in a particular order. Servlet request, then I have said HTTP session, and then I have written servlet context. Okay, and the reason for that, okay, is this has the smallest life. Okay, and this lives longer. Okay, okay. Okay, fine. See, this is smallest life. Okay, and that is a single request. Okay, single request being processed on the server side, and this one, so this is throughout the life of a application, unless you restart the application. So this is you want to have manage objects, right? See, what these allow you to do is keep objects by remembering objects by a name. Okay, add attribute, give a name and store an object. Any kind of object can be given a name and stored. Where do you store them? Okay, I might need this object for subsequent processing within the same request. The current request has come to servlet 1. It will go to servlet 2, maybe it might be going to servlet 3. The same request object is getting going through various service methods. Okay, more than one service method because of forward and include and other things. So there, what should I do? Okay, keep the objects which you want to share with the subsequent servlet, keep them in the servlet request. Okay, HTTP session, this is for the subsequent request coming from the same client. So therefore, I will keep things for this client. I want to manage objects for a particular client. Okay, I have one list, which is a list of, see, in HTTP session, I have, in my example, which I have done, okay, I just put a list, which is like, okay, if there is a shopping cart which is being managed, right? But other than a shopping cart, also, there are more than one items which will be attributes here. Okay, for example, what happens is, because he has done a successful login, okay, you create a user information, because you fetch that information from a database about the user, and keep that as one more item, one more attribute in the session. Because of that, you should be able to show the name of the user and everything on the pages which are shown, displayed to him. Okay, okay, fine. Normally I'll also show you. Fine. This is all processing part. Okay, okay, you might be doing all such thing. After all that, you have to give back a response, right? And giving back a response normally will not be done by the servlet. Okay, it will be done by another servlet. At this moment, yes, we can think about, oh, it will be done by some other servlet. Okay, okay, so a subsequent thing will be forward to, I'm not saying servlet, I'm saying forward to, then forward to another resource. That's what should be done. Okay, one more thing, if you are doing a request dispatcher forward, then you should not have any other statement following that. Okay, right? After a forward, don't keep any more statements. You have to come out after a forward, return from there. Okay, fine. Always keep in mind, if you are including, yes, you can do more things. You can do further processing, further adding to the response. But if you are saying forward, nothing to be done after forward. This I should keep it somewhere here. Fine. So 4 methods in these 3 places. These are same methods, okay, found in all 3 places. And you may have some of the information, some objects which you need at the application level. So that we do at the servlet context. Okay. So any questions so far? Yeah. And this is related to the HTTP session. Okay. Of course, session has other I think we have seen the methods of HTTP session. See, earlier there were other methods which have been deprecated. Instead of these 4 methods, there are some other methods. And see, these are the 4 methods which we'll find in the HTTP session. Okay, let's go back to that HTTP session methods. Okay, you'll find these 4, and the others I think I've discussed them. So these are the methods of HTTP session. Get attribute names, returns, and enumeration. Okay, get creation time. Fine, that's the time of creation of this HTTP session. Okay, get ID. Fine, so you get the session ID basically. Get last access time, get max inactive interval. Okay, get servlet context, right? Servlet context will be available from most of the other components, like request also you can get what is the servlet context. Okay, So to know the servlet context, which is the application for which you are working, because servlet context is important, anything related to the application, okay, it's your access to that application. Okay, get session context, this is no longer valid, deprecated. Okay, right? Get value, basically get value method is same as get attribute. Okay, and this is again, see, takes a name and returns an object. This is get attribute method, but they standardized on those 4 names and then removed it from here. They said, okay, not removed, but they have just made it deprecated. Okay, same thing. Get value names was returning a string array. This was basically the get attribute names. Okay, invalidate. Yeah, that's correct. Fine. Invalidate to invalidate. So once you have said invalidate, that session, it stops tracking the client. One more thing. Okay, it stops tracking the client and the HTTP session becomes invalid. Is new. I think I have explained is new. Put value is same as add attribute. Put value is just nothing but your add attribute method. Okay. This is remove attribute. This is remove value, which is same as remove attribute. Set attribute. Acha, it is set attribute. Add attribute was also there. Oh, it says set attribute, not add attribute. Sorry. The method is set attribute, not the add attribute. Yeah. Okay. Fine. The method here is set attribute, not add attribute. Sorry. Okay. Fine. So you have the set attribute and fine. So this will be okay. If the same name being used again, yeah, it will overwrite. Fine. It replaces. Okay. And so HTTP session, anything, any questions on this?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. And okay, let's do some. Okay, we may not immediately use session because before session we might also like to use the cookie thing. Okay. So okay, let's do some example for one is okay. Earlier we have done a hello servlet. Yeah. Okay, if you now I'm just introducing one more thing. Now, if you look at that hello servlet thing, right? The service method is very much like okay, context and yeah. So I think if this is the service method here, and if I want to convert it into the one which uses HTTP servlet, let's see. So instead of writing like this, if it was HTTP servlet, then what? Another version. If I want to have the version where it is using the HTTP servlet, let's do that. So we'll keep this also, but let's create a subsequent new one. Okay, and we would like to update this to use okay, I'll just change it to hello servlet new. Okay, and we won't say it implements servlet, but we'll say extends from HTTP servlet. Okay, so servlets normally are going to be HTTP based, and so we should be just creating by saying extends HTTP servlet. Okay, once we are saying HTTP servlet, we don't need this. Okay, this method also never to be written this way. If you want to do some initialization, you are interested in a init, in that case you do like this, public void init. Do not override the other one. Okay, you can do some initialization. Okay, fine. This method exists for us, we don't need this. Fine, it's already there in this. We are inheriting from HTTP servlet, which is a class basically. Okay, and destroy method also. So if you want, yes, you can put some finalization. Okay, final thing, anything to be done. Okay, some initialization. It's like okay. If that is what you have done, here you should do release any resources, fine, which were required. That's what should be done in the destroy method. So you may override destroy, that's okay. You want, yes, you can override servlet info. Okay. And okay, now what is the option here? No, you would not do this. Okay, you have a few options, right? You wouldn't be using the servlet request, but you would rather be using the HTTP servlet request, and the type would be HTTP servlet response. Okay, and we don't need this one. Okay, but see, you won't need the context object to be created. You do have the get servlet context method basically, fine, which has been implemented. Okay, so this dot config, no, get servlet config dot get init parameter. Okay, so we can always use the get servlet config method. Right, we don't need a variable for that. We have the method, right? It's a we have inherited from there this method. Okay, and context, or you wanted that context also. Okay, how do we get the context? One thing what you can always do here is change this, or one second, I think okay, and we can do one more the other way. It's like this. Instead of saying this dot get, okay, you can change it like this. Okay, get servlet config dot get init parameter. So we have getter methods for config and context. Okay, so then you might do the same thing here. Okay, out.println like this. Okay, so one option here is this. Okay, now this service method will be invoked whether you do a get or a post or anything. But if you are interested, no, it should be only for a get. In that case, instead of service, make it as do get. Okay, fine. Either make it as service or make it as do get, or maybe do post, or sometimes you may say do get and do post both. And maybe you want to do different things in a get and a do get, and different thing in a do post. Okay, so let's save this as okay. And so this would also work, right? Okay, I've kept these methods. Basically, there's no code in this method, but if someone wants, can just get rid of these methods as well. I'm just showing the purpose of these methods. If at all you would like to do it, yeah. But we don't use the servlet config thing at all. Okay. Never use that. Don't override the servlet config. Okay, fine. So want to try this also? Yeah. Okay. Now just one more point here. See, now what I have to do is I have to go back to the web.xml, make an entry for the URL, fine, and then do it. Okay. Okay. So let's do it that way. Under web apps, I think we have the academic, that is the, oops, sorry. This wasn't required to be opened. Okay, under web.inf, this is the web.xml. Okay, fine. Fine. I think you have understood these tags, the usage of the tags, servlet and servlet, fine. Servlet mapping, how they work. Okay, so we haven't made much change in that servlet except for made it as a HTTP servlet. Fine. So normally we do not write by implementing a servlet interface, but you may go straight away for extending the HTTP servlet. Okay, here are the init parameter, greeting, hello, and okay, let's check this out. So let's create one more. My first, instead of that, I'll make it my second servlet, and this is hello servlet new. Okay, the class is different now. Hello servlet new. If you make changes there, so that will be reflected here. Okay. Let's make it slash new hello. Okay, so URL pattern is slash new hello. So if you say new hello, then it will be the second servlet. And so that's it. This is how we have updated, and we need to make this also work. Let's see. So actually we have to compile also, right? So let's first compile. Tomcat 9 web app. In web app, it is the academic and web.inf, and in that we have the classes folder. Okay, that's a destination, and minus class path dot dot backslash tomcat 9 backslash lib backslash servlet API. And what is to be compiled? Hello servlet. Okay, and there is okay. And so this has compiled, and okay, now we start Tomcat. Okay. Backslash Tomcat and backslash bin backslash startup. Okay. Fine, we can just simply do the startup from here. Okay, so there it has started. Okay. And once the startup is done, and let's go to the API thing and let's open a tab and localhost 8080. We can just examine the Tomcat thing. Fine, we can just check this. Let's check the application first, status of the application. Okay. Academic application is okay. So it's working, right? It is running. Status is running, right? Running is true. Okay. See here, it even tells you how many sessions are currently active in that particular application. Okay. See, in manager we have done a login and therefore it has created one session already. Right. This is through the manager app, right? We did the login. The login which we did was for the manager app. Okay. See, localhost / manager. You can see 8080 / manager. That means it's a manager app. Okay. Fine. So instead of manager app, let's go for so let's use one more tab, and here we use http://localhost:8080/ academic, and that's the application name. In that, what's the URL? I think we said new hello, right? Oh, new academic / new hello. Oh, there's a spelling error. Fine. So if it's not there, if the URL is not valid, fine, we don't have a URL pattern for that, it would give an error. Right? So here it is. Okay. Fine. So this is also working, right? So one thing is how to write. Yes, you should write by extending from HTTP servlet. Fine. That is easier. Okay. Okay. Fine. So we can go with this as a initial example. Okay. Now what we would like to do is we will first like to try out the this thing, request dispatcher thing, right? One exercise for request dispatcher. Let's see how do we use the request dispatcher. Okay. So for request dispatcher, what should we do? We should create one processing servlet and have one servlet which is doing giving a lot of information, right? Okay, which will give the response part. Okay. Okay. So we have, let's develop two servlets, one servlet to do the processing, other servlet to do the response part. Okay. Okay. Let's copy from this itself. And this will say processing servlet. Okay. Right. And this extends HTTP servlet Nothing being done in the init or the destroy. Servlet info, let's call it as what? Instead of hello servlet, this is a processing servlet. Okay, and okay, we are doing the do get part. Yeah, okay. Do get. Now it is HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response. Okay, we got the context object. Okay, we don't want, maybe we don't have anything in the init parameters. Okay, or instead of doing this, right, let's try the methods for getting all the init parameters as a list. Servlet init parameters, okay, equals, and fine. Okay, this is just to show a few things. How do you access all the init parameters, whatever are there in the servlet? Okay, so within that servlet/servlet, if any of the init params have been mentioned, we want all of them to be uh, added to this. Yeah, list of string. So we want to what? How do you want to create this as a list of string, or it's a key value pair basically, right? One init parameter is one key value. Want it this way, or you want to keep it as a map of string comma string, right? So I'm keeping it as a map of string comma string, where the first thing, okay, will be the key will be the init parameter name, and value will be the corresponding init parameters value. Okay, and so we want to collect that and keep it as an object. So servlet init params will have one object for that, where init parameters have been collected from the request, from the config basically. Okay, so we are not doing any such thing, right? Okay, so this is not being done, but instead we'll say, okay, let's do okay, now, yeah, how will you get the we have something called enumeration of string, right? Get init param names equal to, how do you get the init parameter names? Get servlet config dot get init parameter names. I'm keeping this so that you understand how we iterate over an enumeration. Okay, if there is an enumeration, how you can do it, right? Okay, so here you can say while okay, while init parameter names, that's nothing but an enumeration. Okay, so on an enumeration we have the method called has more elements. Okay, and here we are saying string param name equals init param names dot next element. That is how you see. This is how you get the how you iterate over a list of enumeration. So enumeration has these methods, has more elements and next element. Okay, and so you got your key. Basically, parameter name is the key and the parameter value if you want. So how will you get the parameter value? So it should be from the config. Okay, get servlet config. Where is that get servlet? Yeah, get servlet config dot get init parameter. This is the parameter. Okay, this will be as a string. So we want a string like this. And we got our, okay, this is not array list, sorry about this. This is not array list, it's a hash map. Okay, fine. You map, you can use hash map or tree map or hash map, hash table, those are available. Okay. So it will be servlet dot put and so that way you have added and built your map. Okay, so what you have done is you have put it into a map. Right? So one thing what you have done is put everything into a map, and from this this map can then be added to the put into as an attribute, right? So you can now say, okay, I have see, this is for processing whatever init param entries someone might have put in the servlet entry. Web.xml has a servlet entry if there is a init param and a param name param value pair. Okay, so that can all of those whatever you may have, right? I'm not going for a fixed thing like a greeting or any such thing. Okay, whatever is available, let me pick all of them. Okay, and I'll put them in a map, which is again a key value pair, and pass it to the I want it to be used. This is a processing servlet, and it's not going to do any response part. It's going to pass it on to the next servlet, okay, subsequent servlet. So that would be a displaying servlet, the one who will do the displaying part. Okay, so here for the displaying servlet to work on, I am going to pass the map here. How do I pass the map to the next servlet? So I should use the request dot set attribute. Okay, and my attribute name can be, you can say init param names, it will be servlet init params. Okay, and you can decide whatever you like. Okay, it is any kind of a string, it can have space, anything, any name. Normally preferred is not to use space, but I'm just using space in this case here. Okay, we don't normally prefer a space in your names like this. Okay, and this will be your that map is a servlet okay. So this is you are setting as an attribute in the request. See, from servlet context, same way, from servlet context also you would like to do a similar thing, right? Just like we do it from servlet config, init parameters, get init parameter names, or same thing again, a very similar processing maybe you are interested in for the okay. See, once this is done, I think we'll understand why this has been done. context init params. Okay, I'm now creating another one, which is the context init params. Okay. And this will be the get servlet context. Okay, so this is from servlet context. Get init parameter. Okay. So yeah, these were the context parameters, right? So we are not putting it like this, but we are saying, okay, whatever is there, I just want to pick up everything. Okay. This is one. Yeah, we don't need this. And display name, all of these things, right? Get servlet context name. Okay. Context anyway is available everywhere. Could have been used otherwise also, but anyway, yeah. Now this part is for the displaying purpose, right? From here onwards. Okay, all of these, so we don't want them in this manner. Okay, but we would rather have a second servlet do this job for us. Okay, I'm taking it out. Yeah. Okay, so before this, what should be done? Display name equal to this. Maybe you would like to set this as a parameter. Okay, I'm removing this. We don't need this. Yeah. So what should be done here? Create a request dispatcher for the displaying servlet. Okay, equals okay, and we'll need to think of a URL which should be used here slash, or okay, instead of get request dispatcher, we can even use the named dispatcher. I think last time I did talk about the named dispatcher also. Get named dispatcher, and yeah, might use a name like this. So name is display servlet. Let's call it as display servlet. Okay, so this is request dispatcher like this, and rd dot forward. You forward the same request and response objects. Okay, so this is what can be done. Right? Another thing, important thing, after a forward, you can see this is the last statement. I have not done anything. Don't do any statements after a forward. Okay, once you do a forward, there's nothing more to be done. Okay, because from this point onwards, the control is transferred to the request dispatcher, whatever is the so it is now transferred to display servlet. Control transferred to display servlet. Okay, so this will be saved as This one is called processing servlet. Okay. And so this is our processing servlet, and we need a displaying servlet. Okay. Okay, it might take a little time for the displaying servlet to be created, but just to demonstrate the request dispatcher dot forward, okay, uh, just for the time being, what I can do here is, though we have done all this processing, we have created those objects, right? rd dot forward, okay. Now this is forwarding which I'm doing, but currently what I might do here is I'll say, okay, let's not do this one, but let's do it for one of the existing one. So we can create it next time. Basically, that display servlet, we'll take it next time, but this time just doing a forward. Okay, so yeah. Sorry, it will be this here, web XML. What's the servlet name? Okay, we can use my second servlet, that's only having a name. Okay, see, this has no URL pattern, right? For my second servlet, there's no URL pattern. Okay, so my servlet, there is a URL pattern called /new hello. Okay, my first servlet, my second servlet, both have been used. One more servlet. Okay. Okay, we may remove the mapping for the, maybe even my first servlet, I can remove the mapping, or yeah. Okay, let's remove the mapping for the first one. Okay, and let's comment it out, this one. Okay, so there's no URL pattern for /hello, so /hello will not work, that's one thing. Okay, and we have my first servlet which has been created, but there's no URL pattern by which you can go there. Okay, but what we now do is we'll add a one more servlet entry for the one which we have now created. Okay, what is that one? Processing servlet. We have to create processing servlet still. Yeah, processing servlet is not created. See, what are the servlets which have been created? One servlet for my first servlet, which is hello servlet. Another one is my second servlet. This is also the hello. This is hello servlet new. Okay, which we did today. Okay, not much change there, but only change was this. My second servlet uses the HTTP servlet, extending from HTTP servlet. That's the only difference. Okay, one more servlet. This is hello servlet again. So that I'm not changing, but let me create a copy of this, or okay, and I'll create a copy of this one. We are not keeping any init parameters. Okay, for this one we are saying, okay, my processing servlet, and let's have this as processing servlet. Okay, and we'll need a URL mapping. Okay, So for mapping, it's not my first servlet, but rather we have to use this name. One more servlet. No, this is not one more servlet, it is this one. Before the second servlet, this one. Where have we kept my second servlet? My processing servlet, this one. So copy this in the URL mapping. And let's do /process for that. Okay. Okay. And right, so here, okay, we need to compile. We haven't compiled this, right? The new one. Processing servlet.java. Let's compile this. Okay. Import is missing for this one. Okay. And the other thing was actually here. Here. Okay, this is method get servlet context. Let's compile. Public class. Okay, what's the name of the file? Processing servlet. And what is the name? PROC. Okay, we missed out. We'll have to change the file name. Okay. And we'll have to do a save as. Okay. Servlet exception. We forgot a throws servlet exception. See, your service method normally just put this throws servlet exception. Throws IO exception only is done. Comma, and here is the servlet exception. Okay, so normally you will have these two exceptions. Okay, throws these two exceptions. Whatever service or get method, these two exceptions you will have to put in the throws. Okay, and that's it. Fine, and we have that application still running. Okay, so we can just go and do a restart in that application manager. Where is that manager? Here is the manager app. This is that manager app, and we can go and reload. Okay, so this is academic, and we can just say, okay, let's reload this. Okay, reload it, and there are no errors, it seems. Academic. Okay, there's some, yeah. Okay, so this is fine. Okay, so this is running true, and let's check this. Okay, so now you can use it. See, you will not get a different output than what was done earlier. Okay, slash. Okay. Okay, it is through slash process that what we are going through. Now here it has no such element exception, right? So that's an exception in the map. Okay. See, we are doing the processing. You understand the stack trace, right? Fine, you know about the stack trace. So I should trade. So in this, if you have to find out where is the problem, right? So look at the one which is for your particular class. Okay. So in your class, in the processing server, it says line number 34. Okay. Do get line number 34. Okay. From where you actually invoke the next element method. Okay. That's basically a method on iterate enumeration. Okay, I think by mistake we have done some invoking it on a map, it seems. Okay, let's check this. 934, what is it? Init param names dot next element. What is init param names? This is context param names. I think we forgot. This is copy paste problem. Okay. When we do understand it is doing the processing, and then let's see that it forwards, though we are doing all of these things, none of these will be getting displayed there. What will be displayed will be according to the second servlet, right? This is the display servlet. Okay. Achha, we have changed. Oh, we haven't changed this. We have to change. Oh, we forgot to change this. Okay, this has to be changed, and we have to use the name which is for the what is it that we want like to display? First servlet, right? My first servlet. Name is going to be my first servlet. Okay. So we are just saying, okay, go to the control given to my first servlet. So output is not anything to do with all the processing which we have done. Okay. When next time we'll create our display servlet to display everything which is available from the from this particular processing servlet, whatever it has done processing. Okay, and so that we understand how things actually should be done. Okay, we'll need to reload. Okay, here since you have done this, do a reload here. Reload it. Okay, and then this is running is true. Fine, let's check this. Okay, now we go here. Process. Let's check this. Okay, so this is going according to the first servlet itself. Okay, Fine. Okay, so next time, so tomorrow I think what we'll do is we'll update this and make it work according to the have our display servlet created. Okay, and there we'll be able to see that yes, do a processing and display the results of processing in a separate servlet. Okay, so two things can work independent. One does the processing, the second one does the displaying output part. Okay. Okay, so we continue tomorrow then, right?